Hi, everybody. This is Kevin with the Messy City Podcast. I'm delighted today to have two people that I have known for quite some time that do incremental development and small development, and they're my guests in the studio in Kansas City, Monte Anderson and Bernice Radle, who are here actually in town working on a project with my friend Abby Kinney and the good people at Monte Studio. Monte and Bernice, welcome to the studio.
Hi.
Hi. Thank you.
Thanks for coming to this fancy setup that we have.
So
this
fancy.
is wonderful.
This is great.
Why don't we do a real quick overview to make sure people know who you are? Not everybody is like me that has known you for 10 years or more. So who is Monte and who's Bernice?
Okay. Yeah, I'm Monte Anderson. I'm from Dallas, Texas, and I'm a real estate developer who has committed my life to making the southern Dallas County area a better place than it was when I got here. And we do everything from leasing and property management, development, construction of different kinds of properties, from anything from hotels to theaters, warehouses, office, studios, creative spaces, those kinds of things. About a little over 7 years ago, I was one of the co-founders of the Incremental Development Alliance that today is now evolving for Bernice and I, at least, into what's called Neighborhood Evolution, which is an organization that brings cities and small developers together to create a better ecosystem for building local wealth and doing good. And we like to say money is very important and doing good is equal. That's the way we put it. And what we found is politically, when people are separated, if they come together in a little community together, we're really not separate at all. We want the same things. We want clean streets and walkable places. We want a good place for our kids to be, want a place to get coffee or a haircut. We want those kinds of things. So we really think that this kind of work really brings the country together, and also is a good place for locals to build wealth and for the middle class to kind of rebuild itself, which, we see that as, dropping off. I mean, the middle class continues to get more poor, and more poor people become more unhoused. And so we see it. We tend to think that it's a solution for everything, sometimes. So.
Yeah.
And I'm Bernice Radle. I'm from Buffalo, New York. And I always say I'm just a girl with a dollar and a dream. So, but the truth is I've been renovating buildings in Buffalo for the last 15 years, 11 of them with my own company. Like Monte, I'm a real estate. We're a brokerage, we're property management, we're construction. I serve on the zoning board for the city of Buffalo for the last almost 8 years. So I love zoning. I'm an urbanist. I go to all the weird, nerdy urbanist conferences. But truly at my core, I really believe that housing is incredibly important. It's a really, really good way for people to build wealth. We can't change the systems that we have. I think it's a really great way to, invest in communities and invest in yourself, invest in your families, invest in the long-term longevity of your family as a whole with multi-generational wealth. So I don't know. I just, I love old buildings and I love Buffalo so much. Sorry. I know we're in Kansas City right now, but I do like Kansas City too.
Hey, but it's okay. We love Buffalo.
Yeah,
too.
That's right. I know that, and I'm kind of sad because we have this rivalry now with the Bills versus the Chiefs a little bit, but that's okay.
But they're both, like you mentioned last night, a couple of towns with a ton of civic pride.
That's right. Ton of civic pride. Like Kansas City and Buffalo, it feels the same. It's just a different outfit. Buffalo,
exactly.
You walk around, everyone's wearing a Buffalo Bills jacket, shirt. Here it's the same pride. And guess what? You know what helps? When you have a community with pride and you love your community, you'll do anything for it.
Yeah.
And that is something you cannot repeat all over America because not everybody has the Chiefs or whatever that brings people together.
Yeah, my wife likes to joke when we moved back here. She's not from here. She's from the Northeast, and she just couldn't believe all these people just walk around Kansas City that live here with Kansas City shirts on all the time. What's up with that? That's just, you just don't see that a lot of places. But I think there's a lot of these mid-sized cities and regions where people just really think they're great places to live. They have a ton of pride and they want other people to know about them.
Yeah. I have a t-shirt actually. It says, I like you. I love Buffalo. It's really, it's kind of salty, but people know what but absolutely. And it's civic to me. We always, one of the things I say in real estate is you should fall in love. And, a lot of people say, don't fall in love. But if you fall in love, then you can make these really great choices to you do anything for these buildings and for your community. You pick up the trash, you start the block clubs, because in our world, we think real estate isn't it's about, spreadsheets are important. Money is important, but as Monty said, it's, you make money and you do good.
Mm-hmm.
So it's about the money, but it's more, to me at least, it's more about the community and setting up. And you only do that when you love it. You're not going to shovel your neighbors, when there's a blizzard out, and help them, or
Mm-hmm.
bake bread, or start the block club for 3 years in a row, or do what Abby does in KC with these small developer meetups. You do it because you love a place, and we're so lucky to have that, especially here in KC.
I want to pick up on something you both have talked about, which so we all kind of got to know each other and came to know each other through the world of new urbanism,
Mm-hmm.
which is this kind of almost like an urban design cult in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
I think of it, it's a really quirky mix of people who are, interested in planning and design issues. But you all are developers, and there's the subset within new urbanism of the incremental developers who are really trying to figure things out. I guess what I want to ask about is there's a lot of reference in what you're talking about that goes way beyond any of the urban design stuff and all that. And you talk a lot about wealth building. And how important is that? How critical is that for the work that you do? And when you go around the country and talk to people, how critical is that element?
I look at it from my own personal perspective. Sometimes I was the very extremely poor kid in foster care for the first 2 years of my life. And now I own my own home and got out, and by got out, I mean, really, like, I'm surprised. My sister and I are happy and healthy and have good husbands, you know what I mean? And so I see it personally, but you also see the real need for it. I mean, yeah, sure, there's a 401k, but pensions are gone, right? We could get into all this conversation. How do you build your wealth? Mm-hmm. It's really a challenge. I really think we're going to get to a point where we're working full-time jobs and have our own side hustles. And I don't think that that's healthy, but I don't really see another way through it,
Mm-hmm.
And in Buffalo and Kansas City, Kansas City, South Bend, you've got doubles, triples, quads. You have the ability to live in a place and rent out the others and help others, save money for their mortgage payment or to buy a house or whatever they need. But you also have the ability to take in rent and pay that mortgage, so you can then save your money for college for your kiddos or whatever it is. So it's really, to me, it's about being more resilient and having more flexibility over time. We talk a lot about, building wealth, but it's really about having that flexibility to, as your life changes. You have kids, right, especially in the beginning, and that, the costs are really high or all that. Well, wouldn't you love to be able to rent out a little back room in your house to make an extra $600 so you can pay for daycare? Mm-hmm. And we don't design houses like that anymore. Right. Well, at least not a lot of new construction, but all that old stuff did.
Yeah.
A lot of old houses did.
I mean, this country was built on small entrepreneurs, incremental developers. The butcher, the baker, and the candlestick maker, owned a building with 2 apartments above or behind it. It was built, and wealth was built that way, and somewhere over the last 70 years, 60, 70, 80 years, we started to depend on these big developers and big businesses to take care of building our cities instead of building it ourselves. And I think it seems like we just became disconnected from, even if we were interested in design, we weren't doing the work. And my mom was a telephone operator and my dad was a carpenter, not similar to Bernice. We grew up in very middle class, lower middle class neighborhoods. But I knew one thing. I knew that, my neighborhoods changed. I was a product of white flight. And I got to thinking, why do people leave this neighborhood? Why would they leave? And so if people don't love their neighborhood, as Bernice talked about, if they're going to leave. And if you don't have any wealth in the neighborhood, you don't have any stake in the neighborhood, you don't care if you plant the tree or you keep the place clean. You just use it up like a locust, and then you move on to the next place. And so, I think it's vital for this country that the middle class gets back involved in the way their communities look and actually is building this stuff and actually get to own it and building wealth. Because frankly, I just don't trust big business taking my money and handling it. I can't control any of that. What I can control, I can build a duplex, okay? Mm-hmm. And I can control that. There's a lot of stuff I still can't control with cities and banks and things like that, but I can at least control a little bit of that or more than and it gives me something that maybe I leave my legacy to my children or my grandchildren it gives something that you leave. And it's maybe we're not billionaires, but, we can have good health. I mean, quality of life is like this day-to-day stuff, right? I got good health insurance. I got a decent way to travel. I got a decent house. I have food. I don't need to be a billionaire, but it'd be nice to have that flexibility like Bernice just talked about, be able to do the things I want to do and be able to experiment. I mean, we're able to experiment with real estate projects, okay, that banks won't finance, okay, because we just have a hunch that a certain way will work, a new way of doing housing or a new way of splitting up an old retail grocery store.
Right, because we listen.
And we wouldn't be able to do that if we didn't have money. You can't do those kinds of things if you don't have money.
Yeah, I want to talk about getting started in all this. So both of you by now, you're full-time doing what you're doing development, property management, construction management, even, and obviously you didn't start there. There was a lot that you talked about that's music to my ears. I've tried to talk to people about the concept of house hacking forever. And, you mentioned, how cool would it be if you had a little place that you could rent in the back of your house? I've been fortunate now to have done some version of house hacking 3 times. And the first time was the very first house I bought here in Kansas City was actually a triplex. And it was just an old house that had been converted to 3 apartments in the Depression and never deconverted. And so I bought it, was able to live in one unit and rent out the other 2. And basically that paid the mortgage.
Yep.
And so when I started actually working for myself as an entrepreneur when I was 30, I was able to do that with no house payment, which was a game changer, because starting as an entrepreneur is so hard. I basically had no income for the first year. And then later we were able to do it when we had our kids. We had a carriage house behind our townhouse in Savannah that we rented, which mostly covered the mortgage. And it was such an incredible, just lifesaver in many ways in terms of that income, stream. But that's kind of what got me, I think, originally thinking about incremental development years ago. I'm more curious about how you all got started. What do you tell other people who think, wow, I want this, doing this small development is exciting, I want to do that. Where do I begin?
I got started for me. So I started in 2007 working minimum wage for a real estate company. And I was the maintenance coordinator for minimum wage for 4 years. 4 years. I took toilet calls. I took boilers not working, etc. And what I learned was how to lease apartments, how to handle maintenance folks. I did a giant energy retrofit in that mess because I realized all the bills were so expensive and we needed to save money because I wanted to keep the apartments affordable. And so anyway, I go through this whole motion. Long story short, for 4 years, I managed buildings minimum wage, right? And what I learned was the difference between myself and the owner of that property management company, or myself or any other developer I met, was literally just money. So that's it. Me, and the difference is money. I knew the contractors. I knew how to renovate. I was 21, 22, 23, 24. I wasn't, So what I said when I finished that job, I gave my notice. I was still working full time. I was doing some energy efficiency consulting, but I said, in this moment, I'm going to start my own company. And I figured out what was my mission. What was my LLC? What was I going to focus on? And I come back to that a lot because people always ask me, well, what should I do to get in the game? Well, you could get a job, you could get your real estate license, there's a lot of ways to go, but no matter what you do, you have to put in the work. And a lot of people don't realize, 4 years of calls, boilers, hot water tanks, roofs leaking, leasing apartments on the side for extra cash. I didn't even have a car. I had to sell my car. I didn't have any money, but I worked back and forth and up and down. I even convinced the landlord, the owner of the properties, to give me a 1-bedroom apartment, all utilities included, for $425 a month. And I cleaned the hallways and I took out the trash every week, So when you think about it, no matter what you do to get in, it's the hard work that you have to put in, and you can make the mistakes by buying your first building, or you can learn getting a paycheck. I'd probably recommend getting a paycheck, but so it's that. And then one other thing I want to say. So I live in Buffalo. Buffalo is more accessible, right? But there's so many cities and towns and villages all over America that have these types of buildings. We're Peoria, Illinois, Kansas City, Buffalo, South Bend. They're accessible. So when I started my own LLC, it wasn't it was hard work, and we could talk about investors and all that other stuff. But I saw all these vacant buildings in front of me, and they were available for $1, $5,000, $10,000. And so all I knew was I needed money, because if I had money, then I could renovate, because I had all these contractors I knew, all these maintenance people I knew, all these real estate. So you just build that world of yours and stay committed and stay local and put in the work, and you can really, it just takes a while. A lot of people think they're going to get rich or work, for quite a while. 4 years minimum wage. I couldn't even, I swear, one final note, I didn't have a car, but I did save up money for a moped. So I'd meet all my contractors on my moped, like I had a high-waisted little skirt on. I'm like driving around. My window guys are, who is this 22-year-old girl, But you know what? You learn so much, ask the right questions, and you stay, it was great. Some of the best times really I had.
So, I had to start a company because I couldn't get anybody to hire me. So, I was, I raced motorcycles, and basically I had like a 10th grade education, and I was racing motorcycles. And when that ended with injuries, my dad was a sheetrock contractor. He sheetrocked malls. So like these just traveling, construction guys all around. And I hated that. I thought, and I had to work for him because I had no other skills. So I'm like shagging sheetrock around the country, which was not a fun thing to do. And I said, how come you don't work at home? How come you don't work at home? He said, I can't get any work at home. And so basically what I did was I said, I'm going to get involved somehow and try to get involved with my community. So I got involved with all the chambers of commerce and all the organizations in my community of Southern Dallas. And that's how I got so connected to the community. And that's how I learned about farming too, is that I thought if I can commit myself and go to every meeting they have, which is what we teach, in our 12 steps of town making, we teach that, go to every meeting, then I'm going to get to know everybody who's doing work. And then as I got to doing that work, I started cleaning out warehouses and buildings and doing those kinds of things. And then I thought, well, wait a minute, these real estate agents, they're making all the money and I'm doing harder work than they are. And so I got my real estate license and started brokering real estate and was good at it, could sell real estate. And then I thought, well, I need developers to come down here to Southern Dallas to do some good work. Well, they wouldn't do that. They wouldn't come. So I thought, well, how can I do this work? So out of pure desperation, doing the real estate work, brokerage work, leasing space, selling buildings, selling land. And out of pure desperation, I put together, my insurance man and my general contractor buddy, and we each throw in, a little bit of money, and we'd do a project. And so that's how we got in the very beginning, and this is like 1989 for me because my company's a little over 32 years old. But in the very beginning, it was 100% of my business was third-party brokerage. I was helping somebody else lease or sell something. Mm-hmm. And today it's about 20% is. So I'm still a real estate agent today. So I'm still do leasing for myself, but it's all for myself now, instead of somebody else. And so slowly over the years, I found buildings and people liked me, because they knew I was committed to the community. It wasn't just about making money. So they would give me deals or they'd bring me stuff. People with money would come and say, here, we'll help invest with you. So I had lots of community support by committing, which we think is the basis of our philosophy of committing to a place forever. Mm-hmm. So the rest of your life changes the laws of the universe around you.
I want to make sure, I don't want to let the comment go. You talked about, you learn about farming. You're not literally talking about farming, but this is it's a good thing to do.
Cultivating communities.
Yeah. So talk about that's really the first step in the 12-step process you're outlining, which is really finding your farm. So why don't you talk a little bit about that?
So farming for like, it always works better if you if you've grown up in, Kansas City Midtown, here, you grew up here. I mean, it's a natural place for you to farm, because your brain has got all those years of you riding your bicycle and going to school and going to get a haircut. It's all there. So it's already in there. So you have a ton of experience already in there. And so once you consciously commit to say, I'm going to work in Midtown Kansas City the rest of my life, and I take a map and I draw, an outline around that map and say, this is now my farm. So I'm like the master developer, self-proclaimed master developer of this area. Everything is important to me. Not just the property projects I do, not just my duplexes or strip centers or whatever I'm working on, but everything you do is important. So helping you be successful is just as important as helping me. And so that part there, it's like the old saying that as the tide rises, so do all ships. and having that philosophy, which is not a real estate philosophy in the financial real estate world. It's like, I got to beat you,
right.
Or, I got to get the deal before you. I'm not going to share with you. I got to, and this is a totally different look. And farming is that way because we want to all do good. I don't want to be the king. I did at one point, but not now. But I don't want to be the king because there's too much responsibility. It'd be so much better if all of us here have wealth.
That's right.
Then we can help each other. We can do deals with each other, and we can cultivate our communities to the best they can be.
Yeah, I always say that my life is like 1 or 2 miles. My radius is so small. And over the years, even though it is extremely stressful to do this work at times, and you have your good days and your bad days with everything, you just have these I said it last night over dinner, you have like a really deep joy. If you've done what you said you're going to do, for the most part, you always try, you lead with integrity, you work to plant the flowers, your neighbors, Carl and Sadie and all these people around you, and you say hi, and it just gives this kind of deep level of the deep roots. Like I said, I'm like an oak tree. I'm not like a little pine tree. It's going to blow over in a blizzard. Yeah. It's like you have these deep, deep roots within your community, and it really does matter.
And then when you have that, you find that people come to you.
Right. You find
attractive.
You find buildings, right? You become attractive. You find buildings. You also find, you might find people for other buildings. Again, you're just working with each other, and you become more and more attractive, over time, to money, to goodness. I mean, I think I'd like to think so.
Yeah. So let's talk about money a little bit, because I think for especially rookie developers, people who've never done this before, but they have an interest in it, the scariest aspect is money. And how the heck do you find money? How do you I have this dream, I see this building, but oh God, I'll never have that much money. I'll never have the money to be able to do that. How do you talk to people about money and finding money to make projects happen?
I always say, personally, I say, if I can do it, then you can. But it comes with a lot of preparation and a lot of work for yourself. You have to get yourself ready. Yeah. You have to understand what you're doing. You have to commit yourself. You have to learn about financing. You got to, you don't have to know everything. You never will. But like Monte said earlier, you get your team together. You have your board of directors, right? You have your president, your vice president, all your people, which is really your accountant, your bookkeeper, your contractor. You build this little world around you, and then you start there's always risk, but you start to. It's kind of hard to even talk about, but it starts to find you, and it starts to work. But you can't just look on Zillow and be like, oh, I see a duplex, I'm going to buy this tomorrow. You're not ready. No bank will even lend to you. You got to do the work. You got to prepare. You have to get your documents together. You have to have your credit together. I always tell people, put everything on auto pay, minimum auto pay, because if you miss $125 payment, you may miss a loan because of it. So that was one of the things when I started my office, that's what I did, because I realized, I said, oh, my credit's not like great. Okay, auto pay, right? So you get your credit together, you get your banks, you build these relationships, and then you can really look at buildings, and then you can start running numbers. A lot of people buy the building first, and then they come to us panicked, like, what do we do?
Today what I wanted to do in the beginning, and this is a very common mistake that people without money say, all I need is a billionaire just to come over here and help me and just trust me. So that ain't going to happen. Money doesn't work that way. Money is a really good thing if you understand it. But here's what does happen. If you will take these steps that we talk about in the 12 steps, if you will take the steps and you will basically look at your farm, you'll find out who your team is, and you put your team around you. So if you're weak, if I'm new, I'm weak, but I have this team around me that's strong, and they're part of me. And then I get my financing, not in my due diligence. I get, it's the details are done. I know my zoning is done. I know I've got good sewer. I know that structurally and fire protection. I know all that. Bernice and I call these the deal killers: fire, zoning, utilities, and accessibility. Those are the deal killers. Get those. So you have these bases. People with money will understand that you've got this due diligence. So it can't just be superficial. Oh, look how pretty this is. This is pretty over here. Well, what about the fire? What about the elevator? And then when you do that and you have them in the right order, and then you have your credit or your financials, even if they're not that good.
Right.
So pretend that you're a multi-millionaire. Get your financials in order, just like you were a pretend that you're that. And then you will start to attract and look better. Because most of the time with banks, when they check off your files in the banks and they look at it's about having all the paperwork in the right order.
Yeah.
It's not even as much as sometimes your net worth, although you do got to have some credit and some net worth. I'm not saying that. But then you can also raise money very easy when you have these things, when you have the story, and it's not just superficial. You have the real story. Like, I can prove. What makes you think you can get $30 a square foot, Monte? Well, let me show you. See this space here? Do you think I can get $700 for it? That's $30 a square foot. And they said, well, yeah, it looks like you could get $700 for that space. So you give people like practical things they can look at and say, does this seem realistic, Mr. Investor, Mrs. Investor, Mr. Banker? Does this seem realistic? Oh yeah, it seems realistic. Okay, then here's your proof that I can do this.
So I mean, none of us like grew up around people who have a lot of money. I didn't do that. And neither of you did. How do you find those people who have money that might be interested?
Well, like I said, you have to get yourself together. And then once you have it together, then you start reaching out. And there are people, there's local folks. As Monte said, he tapped into like the chamber, and there's, or you have your, you can ask your bankers, you can ask so many other people, who would you get to loan me this money? But really comes at being prepared. Sometimes you could go a traditional bank route. You can say, I'm going to go residential mortgage with a duplex, done, right? Then you don't really need investors and all this other stuff. But other times you're in more complicated deals, you have to start bringing more pieces of the puzzle. The one thing to remember is that, you need money, but you also need like time and hustle, right? And it's okay if you don't have the money. And it's also okay if you're not great at bookkeeping or great at certain things. But if you have the hustle and the commitment to community, and you can lease the spaces and bring this building back to life, well, the person with money doesn't have that time. They don't have the commitment to community. They don't understand. So it's like you're bringing in this huge asset, that you're bringing in the asset that makes them money, right? But and so that's really important. Just you have to prepare, make sure you're taking care and building your life and with your assets that you can bring to the table.
And one of the things you talked about last night, especially, was where you work in Buffalo, and in a lot of communities, probably South Dallas was the same when you started. It was just incredibly hard to get a bank loan for anything.
Oh, never.
Banks just won't lend.
Yeah,
so you eventually had to get your act together so you could find individuals who would do that.
Right. And what I did, I actually went to a bank and I said, hey, I had a vacant building. I was doing it all kind of wrong. I had a vacant house, and I was like, I want a loan for this house. And they're like, well, we don't have, what? Their minimum loan was $50,000 minimum. This was a $20,000 house. They're like, no, we don't loan. And I hit a wall, and I didn't understand. And all of that, what I called it back then, I still call it, but it's called the vacancy vortex. When a house gets vacant, right? You can't get insurance. You can't get a loan. You can't get anyone to believe in it. You can't fix the windows. You can't fix the roof, right? And then it just starts to decline in this vortex. And so one of those was getting a loan. So I had to start with cash and finding a cash investor. And I got lucky. I did a lot of hard work, but I also got lucky. I was there's a combination. There's a whole other story. We have a whole hour conversation how I found my first investor. But when I found this person, he said, I want to help you. I said, the thing I need is money. I live in Buffalo, New York. It makes some sense, but I need money. And he said, okay, well, how much? Follow up. Here's my card. And you bet I was sending an email on Monday morning. Hey, let's being serious, But even in that moment, what I had with me was a real estate attorney who helped me. Right. Because again, having the people around you, I called them up because I had already done my homework. I was like, I started building my connections. I had all these people. I had my real estate attorney. I said, hey, I met a guy this weekend at a conference who said he wanted to help me. He said, let's get on the call. I'll be on the call with you. Good. Because I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. Right. And then all of a sudden he's muting the thing going, where did you find this guy? Oh my gosh. And I'm getting, and I was able to off to the races. I was, now it's harder for people. It's harder for people to find some money. Right? Not everybody has access. I didn't, but you put yourself in that world, even in working in maintenance with this large developer. If I texted him right now, 15 years later, if I texted my old boss, hey, I need you interested in Buffalo? He might say yes. He might, so it's just about putting yourself out there and building your world and making those connections, and you will find.
I hated really asking for money. It was just, I was always insecure with it because my dad had originally told me, the rich get richer and we're not one of them. We're just, and he worked hard and he actually built some wealth, but it was hard for me to ask. I had this block, with this money. And so I learned to do this one thing. I learned to go to people and go, do you know anybody that might be interested? I said this last night. Do you know anybody that might be interested in investing some money with me? And I'd be talking to a banker. And the banker's got a computer over there full of people with money in the bank. I said, he can't give me that list, but he can actually introduce me to somebody. And some of my best investors today went through an accountant I knew. And I said, hey, I'm talking to an accountant friend of mine. I said, hey, do you know anybody that want to invest some money in an old hotel? Or he says, I know some people that might be interested in that. They're still my partners after like 20 years, and so it's like asking people, asking your friends, asking your family. You let people know once you have a defined purpose. Okay, my mission is to make, Midtown the best it can be. And I'm going to do that by rebuilding real estate and making real estate the best it can be. Once people know that you've got this mission, this purpose and stuff, then you know what to talk to people about. And then people are attracted to people who know where they're going. Mm-hmm. Okay, and money will come to you. It'll come to you in the oddest ways. You have to keep your ears open. And we talked this morning, the three of us talked a lot about humility. So you have to keep your ears open and you have to keep, it really don't matter what I think. Okay. What matters is what, bankers and investors and tenants and occupants and buyers think. I'm bridging these things together. And so you have to keep yourself in the humility, you're not that good, you're good, but you're not that good. You got to keep yourself. That humility is really important to attract. You're not very attractive when you don't have that. And mm-hmm. I've seen many people lose everything because of that. That ego thing. That I don't know if that makes any sense, but mm-hmm. It's kind of that ego thing.
Sure.
I want to share one piece of advice too that really helped me find my first banker, because I was working in cash for a long time in Buffalo. So there was a building I was interested, a mixed use building in my neighborhood, and I actually had friends in South Buffalo, not my farm, but their farm. They're small developers. They were doing similar buildings. It was like a mixed-use building with an apartment in the back. And so I texted him. I knew him through the world. We were doing some leasing for him. He's like a friend, but also we did a little work for him. And I said, hey, Pete, who do you know that would lend me money? I sent him a picture of the building. I said, who do you know that would be interested in lending for this type of building? Anyone in Buffalo? Because all the local banks I had talked to didn't. Yeah. They were like, no, it's too complicated. It's mixed use, et cetera. He said, oh, you got to talk to Ashley. And I said, okay. So he sent a text, Bernice, meet Ashley. Ashley, meet Bernice. You need to know each other. I put all my stuff together. I go meet Ashley at the bank. She's like 30 years old. She's got teal hair. She got a nose ring. And I was like, oh my gosh, we're going to be best friends. And she lent me for a vegan pie shop. She lent us for a Democratic Socialist hall. She lent me in Niagara Falls, my hometown, which is harder to loan. She said, I bought this house for $10,000. She's like, you need a loan for this? Sure. We did a project with the land bank. She goes, yeah, I'll lend you the money for renovation. She did renovation to perm loans for me. It was just like having that person, you're human, right? Mm-hmm. So all because I asked Pete one question, right? And he didn't have to do it for free for me, but he did, because I had built that level of love and community and commitment and friendship even with him, right? So that's so important, is just keeping your heart open and being, being caring, and working within your community. Sometimes it's for free. Sometimes you help people out, but you never know when it's going to come back to you.
Right. So let's be cold-hearted for a minute then.
Sure.
And let's talk about making money. This is something you also talked about last night. I think a lot of us and a lot of people that travel in our circles are very idealistic. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm certainly that way too. I have, I've always been a little idealistic about trying to save communities and build a better place and all mm-hmm. that other stuff. But you also talked a lot last night about the importance of that. Whatever you do, you've got to make money doing it. So talk about the thought process. Why is it so important to prioritize making money as a small developer? Why not just say you're trying to do really good stuff? Yeah,
because it's not sustainable, first of all, because it takes a lot of money to do this kind of work. It takes a lot of money to do any kind of business. To do the business your way, to do it this idealistic way. Mm-hmm. So to be idealistic, you got to have money. And I'm with you there. I mean, that's why we like each other. I mean, that's why, because we are idealistic. But to do idealistic work, to do to take an old, hack a house, to take an old shopping center and put apartments in the middle of the parking lot. I mean, to buy an old motor court hotel or to restore an old theater, those are all idealistic things. And without money, you can never do those. And the banks, they're looking for the boxes to check. I mean, it'd be a lot easier for me today to go out and develop 200 units of, apartments, a big strip center with Bed Bath & Beyond and, Kroger in it. I mean, it would be a lot easier to build Wendy's, hamburger places all over the place, but we don't do that. I mean, those are like credit deals. We don't do that. We do these idealistic things. We look for legendary pie makers and taco makers and barbecue people. We're looking for those people, and those people are not credit worthy a lot of times, and so if we want to, we want to really create culture and the vibe, of a cool place and stuff. You have to have those people. Culture comes from people with lesser means because you're gritty then, you're risk taker. You get conservative, when you get more money. So you're less likely to create culture. So you can't create culture, if you don't have money. I mean, it's vital to do to be idealistic. You have to have money. So how to create what we call the flywheel effect, how to get into the flywheel, how to work in your farm, how to make yourself viable and be able to provide a really good service as part of your deal and to yourself is crucial. And if you don't have it, you're not going to be there, or you're going to be able to do it one time. And we know a lot of developers who basically did one shot at one thing. They blew their whole wad of money, at one time, and they can't do it again. And so Bernice and I literally do hundreds of projects. I mean, we have hundreds of tenants together. We have over 700 tenants together. 700. So that's a lot.
And almost every one of them has my personal cell phone number.
Mine too.
So, yeah. So, which people won't even advise for.
And we wouldn't be here today if we weren't idealistic. If we weren't idealistic today, Abby Kinney wouldn't have met us and called us to come and help work on the Marlboro School because she believed it was a worthwhile project. And we saw it and thought the same thing. Yep. And we got the people that are doing it. They now believe that it's a cultural, significant, project. And it takes money to do that.
Yeah, it does. It takes money to renovate a house. It just does. Not even a little bit of money, honestly. It's a lot.
Yeah.
I always say I'm a dreamer and a doer. It's like one of my best qualities. But none of us, everything that we do, none of it is just with ourselves. So we have whole teams helping us, whether it's our quote unquote board of directors or our staff or, our people. It's just, truly takes a village to do these projects. So you really have to be idealistic. You have to see what it looks like. I mean, when you're looking at vacant properties that have been run down for 40 years, you have to be like, oh my gosh, I love those windows. I love this storefront. I can see a pie shop here. And I always say my dreams are like big dreams, but they're also little, right? It's a one duplex, one triplex, but over time I renovate one duplex, and then another. And all of a sudden I'm biking around my neighborhood and I've touched so many of these projects, and they're not all mine, by the way. Right? You want to talk about money. In order for me to get paid, I have to do other people's work for them, because small projects have such little teeny, maybe if you want to make money, it has small profits. So we have to constantly be bringing in other work. We have leasing, property management, consulting work. We're here. It's part of the reason why we're here. All of that helps into, paying our bills and all the other stuff. It's complicated.
How did you get to the point where you were able to do this full time?
I made a decision that before I was 30 years old, Abby, who's here listening, that I would, personally, I made a decision. I wanted to jump and leap into it before I was 30. So I did. 2 weeks before I turned 30, I opened my own office. I had one desk, $450 a month rent. I took on one client who paid me like $5,000 a month, and then less my expenses, of course. And I managed all his properties for him, and it was crazy chaos because they're all vacant and garbage. Sorry if he's listening, but they were. And I just leapt into the abyss, and thought, and I wasn't really that prepared, honestly. I got through it, but it was hard. it was a lot harder than I thought, you know. I picked up the Property Management for Dummies book. Yeah. But I had 4 years of experience. So I wasn't doing it all alone on my own. Right. But yeah. So, and I never am alone, but yeah, it's hard work.
You mentioned earlier that you've had a lot of people who that you've run across, they'd go and do one project and then really don't ever do anything beyond that. I'm curious, you know, what are some of the really common mistakes that you see, you know, rookie developers?
Just don't name names, Monte.
You don't have to name names.
So,
but
yeah,
I wouldn't do that.
Yeah, what are some of the things that you see frequently?
Here's the most common thing is that especially men have more of a problem with women than this. So as men think that instead of starting off we would always tell somebody we've met with people while we're here that say, look, start with one house that's already built, fix it up, you know, cut a room off, house hack, you know, one room, start with that, do another one, do 3 or 4 of those, get used to doing transactions. Mm-hmm. So this is like practice. Like a lawyer doesn't just go do law. They practice law. A doctor practices medicine. This is a practice. You know, you need projects to practice. If you spend, what would happen with many people I know is they'll say we're going to do a small project. It's 30 units. Well, 30 units, that's $7 or $8 million deal. That's not a small project, no. You know. And they'll waste they'll work 2 to 3 to 4 years to get that done. And by the time they get it done, they've only done one project. They haven't really learned the practice of real estate. And then they're so beat up and so worn out, and all their assets are gone or either tied up with this, that they've had to just go get a job, and they're not even in the game the same. And it's more of a mental game. And if you start with one house, and by the way, some of the wealthiest people I know only own single family houses. Mm-hmm. They just own a whole bunch of single family houses. So there's nothing wrong with having a whole bunch of little projects. In fact, that's a good thing. I mean, you talk about having a good base of risk, you know, it's really a good risk, but that is the number one. And what's funny about women versus men, you know, I always say this to Bernice is, you know, men conquer and women nurture. And so nurturing is one house at a time. Men conquering is like getting a whole village. I'm going to go conquer the village, you know, and grab the whole thing. Mm-hmm. And that's not so good. You know, over the long, you're beat up, you know, you're war torn, you know, when you're nurturing, you know, you're kind of it's this incrementalism. Nurturing is incrementalism. Mm-hmm. And I say to them all the time, you want to do 50-story buildings? Go for it. Start with a house. Yeah. And then do a duplex, and then do a fourplex, then do a little mixed use, and then do a strip center. You know, then so it's do the steps. And by the time you get up there, you may either decide, I don't want to ever do that, or you're able to do it, and you have such a base of cash flow, you have a base of operation, and you have self-esteem, and you have confidence, and you have all these things that you can actually handle it.
And just remember, when you start small projects, and if you fail, you don't fail that far. Yeah. You know, for me, growing up poor, I'm like, I can hardly handle projects that are giant. Even the 10 years, 15 years later, right? Mm-hmm. And so I'm very much comfortable if I have a 3-unit building and I know that my mortgage is, you know, capable of being paid with 1 or 2 units, and I can put a little money aside, or I can give, even if it means I can give like the one of the tenants a better, you know, lower rent, you know, I don't care as long as my bills are paid, right? So I just, you don't fall as far. And you can really catch yourself, and you catch yourself quicker, for that matter, because you make tons of mistakes all day. I mean, every day there's mistakes that are made, and we're not talking $20 mistakes. You know, we're talking $200, $2,000, $5,000. You know, let's say you don't realize you have to replace a sewer, right, or whatever, or water line. Well, that's $10,000 in Buffalo, right? So all of a sudden, where are you going to get the $10,000? You're going to wish you had that experience to know to even think about that water line, right? So it's really important. I don't know. I always think
sometimes I don't want to think about them because then I won't do the deal. I want to do the deal so bad I just do it anyway.
Yeah, and I think about that too. What would 25-year-old Bernice do versus 36-year-old Bernice? 25-year-old Bernice would buy that building. You know? Yeah. So I mean, I bought the craziest things at that age.
I still do it.
Yeah. And I always thought it's so weird. I sometimes I buy a building because I like the one ceiling or one window or one storefront or a tin ceiling. I bought a building for 12 grand because I like the tin ceiling in the dining room.
Yeah.
Like, and then I just saved everything else and restored the rest. And it was, so it just, anyway, I digress. It's,
No.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, along those lines, I mean, is there a particular like personal failure that you have like in your resume dealing with this that really stands out in your brain that was like, oh God, what a mistake that was. And I should not ever do that again.
I would say, I don't want to point to one because this is recorded, but for me personally, you have to make sure your operating docs are organized and up. And I've actually won because of this and I've lost because of this. So make sure that if you're going to enter partnerships or enter agreements, you got to make sure that it's papered, documented, and it's really, really important to do, especially with business partners. And that type of stuff. Just make sure you have an attorney review the things that you're doing. Right.
Here's the biggest mistake. And there's been many, but I've been able to recover from them because, see, it seems like the universe or God takes care of fools and children, so I've been taken care of pretty good. so and when you're committed to something, it seems like things just kind of work out when you don't quit. So if you commit to it and you don't quit, they work out. But I can tell you this, my problems have all come from my humility and my ego. When I first did this hotel I talk about all the time, the Belmont Hotel. When I did that hotel, I thought, how hard could it be? How difficult could it be? I was so arrogant at that point of thinking I could just do anything because I had done, weird things and done things. I was so arrogant. I thought I could just do it. And it kicked me hard. In fact, it took all my wealth. But I just didn't give up. And I never gave up. And it gave it back to me eventually. But it did nearly, I was ready for liquidation. I was getting ready to walk from Dallas to Washington in protest of loans and small business and banking. I was just going to walk and talk in little towns about how bad the banking system was, but my problems always have really came from my own self and my just getting myself. And that's how I've learned. That's why I talk about this a lot, about the humility part, because it's so important. Success for me is like this, is a red flag in front of me. And it's saying, beware, you're in dangerous territory because you think you know everything. Mm-hmm. So and then when I'm down, it's gratitude. So I can just I'm grateful to have shoes today and some food and a place to be in out of the weather, And so those things keep me balanced. They keep me balanced here. And then this business is it's not for the light of heart here. It is highly stressful. And you got to keep it in perspective. If money can fix it, you don't have a problem. Okay. If money can't fix it, you got a problem. Mm-hmm. And money can fix the stuff that I've got right now or in people in my life. And so, if somebody's sick with cancer or something, then, that's a problem. But a building, not being able to make the taxes or, can't make the payment, that ain't a problem.
Right.
It is, but it's not, in the scheme of things. So you have to put the stuff into perspective so you can handle yourself. Yeah,
I personally take my stress really personally because I believe that home is so important. So I've really been trying to work on how I respond to stress, especially in like times of need. We have blizzards and all this extreme weather and like just in general, I don't even want to get into it, but it's hard for me because I take it so personal.
Yeah, she does.
Right. Yeah. And my therapist always like, you need to not take this so personally. I'm like, but I experienced such poverty and like, I had no heat and I had no water and we had no electric and all this stuff really. So when we have like a no heat call on a Friday, it's like it springs my, 8-year-old self with no heat in the middle of winter, and I've been trying to work with that, but I don't know. That's like ingrained. It's just there, and honestly, it makes me probably better. All my tenants, they know, they have my phone number. They know that we're around. Yeah. We will get there. Do not think that I'm forgotten about you or I'm not thinking about you or I'll be up in the middle of the night thinking about you because they know. So I always say we're not perfect, but we do care. No one can tell me I don't care.
And I'm guessing, Bernice, that probably translates to an advantage to you in probably getting and retaining good tenants because of that reputation.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, that leads me, to another question, which is, we've talked a lot about the challenges. There's a ton of challenges. There's the work you got to put in, finding money. There's a lot of things that are hard. There are a lot of advantages too about being a smaller local developer. And you talked about those a little bit last night as well. I wonder if you could just elaborate on those, because I don't think people often think about the fact that, yeah, there's all these 10 different things that look like a struggle, but there are real advantages too.
I think first of all, one of the real advantages is that the kind of work we do, there's no market study that can prove. I mean, if you're wanting to do a project and you want it to pencil perfectly and you get a market study and it says this, there's 100 other people doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, 100 other people. But if you're cutting edge stuff like we are, okay, you've got to have a sense of the community. You got to know it. You got to sense it and feel it. And by being so entrenched in the community and close to our tenants and our maintenance people and our janitors and people like that, then we just feel it inside. It lives in us. And that advantage, no corporation, no big business can ever can get that. They want to get that. They do market studies. They pay tons of money to get that. But we know, I mean, we can tell you right now, she or I could tell you in our neighborhood exactly what you could get for rent for X kind of space, whatever it is. We could tell you pretty close. We could tell you, we could, just like the farmer, we can tell you if the weather's changing, what the crops are going to be like this year. So we can sense right now, based on our rent, our income from our tenants, what's coming ahead in the financial world. Because the first people that are hit are sometimes these local people. We can also tell you this, by being so local, sometimes we're insulated from the rest of the country's woes and problems, because we trade in basic stuff, haircuts, pies. We trade in basic things. We don't get tricky, and so we have the ability to maneuver and adjust and make those adjustments like that. I mean, we can move. And right now, I mean, you look at January till now in banking, how big, I mean, prime rate is double during that period. I mean, who's adjusting?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So we're still today doing deals, still leasing space, still doing our deals. It didn't change anything for us.
No.
It's just the plywood went up. Yeah. You might as well said plywood went up. It's the same thing.
Some small approaches may be a bit different, but yeah, you're right. And the other thing I'd like to it's kind of a silly thing to think about, but when you're working locally, then you can to help the local community. So you're helping, like, you're not just building a building, right? Or you're not renovating a building. You're helping a local business owner open the nail salon, right? His popcorn shop or the coffee shop or whatever the case may be. We have, we have cakes and bakers and nonprofits that rent from us. So you're really helping them start their livelihoods. I always say storefronts are where dreams come true, because that's the truth, right? And so every building that we do that's like mixed use with a little baby storefront, you're helping the neighborhood, you're helping, you're paying your bill that you need, but you're also helping these people just start their dreams, and you're believing in them too.
Mm-hmm.
And so your life gets better. I mean, I think about it all the time. I'm like, I've got good coffee, we've got cool pie, I could tell you about Josh Allen's birthday cakes that he gets, because one of our tenants is his cake baker, So it's like, it's just, I don't know, makes it kind of fun, makes it. And so if you're like, oh, our neighborhood needs a laundromat, well, you're waiting for someone to put a laundromat in. Well, you can do it yourself.
Yeah.
Right. You can buy the building, you can invest in the laundry equipment, and you could make money there, and you can rent the apartments out. And then you get to make the choice to help. Maybe the apartments are below market, right? Instead of 1,000, they're 800, because those two people are trying to save it for their own house. Those are the choices that you can make local. Yeah. And it's so important. Many of my buildings are below market, far below market. You got to do what's right for you. But one of my commitments has been affordable housing, because I grew up poor. Not everything we do is, very, very low income. But, I have buildings with rents $550 to $850 when the market would be $900 to $1,500, right? And but you can make those choices. That's what's so cool about the local. And when you see people eye to eye, you can't give them the finger or tell them swear word. You're not in a car. You're literally walking past your neighbors, and that's what's so cool about being local.
One last thing I was going to say here is that it's this, like we're what we do in being local, like we are. is this: one day when it gets to the end of our life, when we're ready to graduate, okay, and it's getting closer for all of us every day. So when you look back, and I'm talking to my 40-year-old granddaughter, who's now, that later on is 40 years old, and she looks around and she says, "What was it all about for you guys? Did you just build all these parking lots and these bad strip centers and this bad property? Is this what you left us? Is this what you thought of us? Is this really what you thought of us? Or did you think enough to try to give us a pie shop, or to give us some walkable neighborhoods, or some better bike lanes, or some better thing? Did you, which conversation are we going to have with our grandkids?" And so we have the choice. We've taken maybe the hard path. It's not the easy path, but in this path here, we're going to be able to answer that question on the days that we get ready for graduation.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I go to sleep knowing I did what I could.
Yeah.
And it was never perfect, but I always tried.
Well, that's a great place to stop. I know you've got a full schedule today and other things to get onto. I do want to say, if you are in a place where Monte or Bernice come and talk about what they're doing, I know they're doing things around the country. I'll just tell you from my own experience, there's just nothing that gets me more fired up, and ready to just go out and do something. When I hear the two of you talk about what you're doing and the advice that you give, it's absolutely infectious. And the energy in the room last night, I think people really felt that. And I think there's a lot of people who are really eager to, pick up and do whatever their next project is as a result. So congrats to you both.
Thanks for saying that.
I do want to wrap by, this is the Messy City podcast. So I ask everybody who comes on here at the end to think about a place. Is there a place, a city, a town, a neighborhood that you think might fit that description, someplace that's more organic, more incremental in nature, more small development? What is a place that comes to mind that you love when you think about, when you hear that phrase?
I'm going to say, I'd probably say Amsterdam, but Marrakesh comes to my mind because it's just that your senses are on fire when you're there. And it's just messy and organic and incredible. And there's cats, there's donkeys, there's people, there's chickens getting their necks cut off for food that day. And it's wild. It's amazing. I didn't get enough of it when we were there. I was there on my honeymoon 5 years ago, and I think about it almost every day.
All right.
Yeah.
I have to always say South Beach in Florida, not the tall, messy stuff on the beach, but the real urbanism of South Beach and the small blocks and the little short. It's such a perfect gridded place. But I also will have to say my own Main Street in Duncanville, Texas, where I look out my loft apartment into the 24-hour tire store, and how much, like I told the girls earlier, that the entertainment was so good, and to have just the people and the sirens and the walkability of a place that was dead, is like happening now. And it may not be perfect because the tire store is across the street, but it's our tire store, and it's like that grittiness of one at a time, one more donut shop with better coffee, a place to get a haircut, slowly but surely, one little thing and to see it happen like that, the messiness, and it's not perfect at all. It's very messy. But it's beautiful.
Yeah, that's terrific. Mm-hmm. Well, thanks to you both. I think, as you mentioned last night, we all have a football connection. Monte's right that the Chiefs were originally the Dallas Texans, and the Hunt family moved them to Kansas City. And my hope is that the Chiefs and the Bills are together in the AFC Championship game for years to come. Continue the battle of Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes. Hopefully we can both enjoy that for a long time.
So, it's funny because I became a Bills and Chiefs fan vicariously because of these two. These years. So I had to live vicariously through them because the Cowboys just
it's
tanked.
So funny. It's been Texas, go Bills, and then you go Chiefs. Yeah.
It's been a fun ride for us, definitely in Kansas City. I know
it's good to feel like a win, and our more legacy cities, we need wins.
We do.
Yeah.
Well, it's a funny thing, and it's a total digression on all this, but it's interesting that the cities that have the most passionate fan bases in regards to major sports are always smaller and medium-sized cities.
Yep.
Always.
And they also have a hole in the roof. The people with the holes in the roofs takes the soul out of the game. the roofs takes the soul out of the game.
It does.
And the Cowboys, that's what's happened to us.
Yeah.
I'm telling you.
Well, your owner's a little off the wall too.
Oh, don't get money on that. Don't get money on that. Okay. More about urbanism, walkability.
Thanks to you both. Really appreciate
Thank
your
you.
time.
Thank you.